The emergency beacon had been flashing for 17 hours before anyone on the Galactic Council bothered to acknowledge it. Ambassador of the Collective watched the red light pulse against the polished walls of the Grand Chamber with growing irritation. The beacon originated from a small blue planet in the outer spiral arm, a planet called Earth, a world that had only recently been granted provisional membership in the galactic community. "They are probably panicking over another meteor shower," High Chancellor said dismissively. His 4 eyes blinked in sequence as he waved one of his 6 appendages toward the communication terminal. "These humans are remarkably fragile creatures. They fear everything." The other council members made sounds of agreement. They clicked their mandibles in amusement. The delegates rumbled their massive bodies in what passed for laughter among their kind. Even the typically sympathetic fluttered their wings with barely concealed impatience. Did not join in their mockery. Something about the beacon troubled her. She had spent 3 standard cycles studying humanity before their first contact with the galactic community. She had read their literature, analyzed their history, observed their behavior patterns. These were not a people who cried wolf without reason. They had survived extinction-level events before. They had clawed their way from caves to starships in a remarkably short time. They did not panic easily. "Perhaps we should at least hear their message," suggested carefully. She knew better than to advocate too strongly for the humans. The Council had already made its opinion of Earth quite clear. They considered humanity a curiosity at best, a potential threat at worst. Their provisional membership was more about keeping them contained than welcoming them as equals. "Very well," sighed with all 4 of his breathing tubes. "Play the transmission. Let us see what has frightened our members this time." The holographic display flickered to life at the center of the chamber. A human female appeared, her face streaked with something dark. It took a moment to realize it was blood. The human's uniform was torn, and behind her, alarms blared in an unending symphony of distress. "This is Secretary General Helena Marsh of the United Earth Government," the human said. Her voice was steady despite the chaos around her. "We are transmitting on all emergency frequencies. The Galactic Council must respond immediately. We have evidence that the Void Swarm is not extinct as previously reported. I repeat, the Void Swarm is active and has entered our solar system. They have already consumed the outer planets. Jupiter is gone. Saturn is being devoured as I speak. We estimate Earth has 72 hours before the swarm reaches our orbit." The chamber fell silent, felt her circulatory fluid freeze in her veins. The Void Swarm. The name alone was enough to strike terror into the hearts of every species in the known galaxy. They were a consuming force of nature, a wave of destruction that moved through space like a plague of locusts through a field of grain. Except these locusts were the size of starships, and they did not merely eat crops. They consumed entire worlds, stars, solar systems. Everything in their path was broken down into the base elements that fueled their endless reproduction. "That is impossible," said, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. "The Void Swarm was eradicated 3,000 cycles ago. The Great Alliance destroyed them at the Battle of the Crimson Nebula." "Play the rest of the transmission," demanded, forgetting her usual deference. "Play it now." The hologram shifted, showing data streams and visual recordings. The images that followed would haunt for the rest of her life. Billions of dark shapes moved through space like a living shadow. They flowed around Jupiter like water around a stone, except the stone was shrinking, being consumed. The massive gas giant that had existed for billions of years was being eaten alive. Its swirling storms were disappearing section by section as the swarm fed. "We are requesting immediate evacuation assistance," Secretary General Marsh continued. "Earth has a population of 12 billion. We have transport capacity for approximately 200 million. We need ships. We need weapons. We need help. The Galactic Council promised to protect its members. We are calling in that promise." The transmission ended. The chamber remained silent for a long moment, then cleared his throat with a wet, uncomfortable sound. "The Council will convene in private session to discuss this matter," he announced. "All non-essential personnel are dismissed." "Did not move. This is not a matter for private discussion," she said. "This is a matter of survival. Humanity needs our help now. Every moment we delay, the swarm grows closer to Earth." "Ambassador," said coldly, "you forget your place. Humanity is a provisional member. They have no voting rights in this chamber. Their request will be considered according to proper procedure." "Proper procedure will take weeks," protested. "They have 72 hours. "Then perhaps they should have chosen a more convenient time for their crisis," replied. "This session is adjourned." The private session lasted for 6 hours. Was not permitted to attend, but she had sources within the council chamber. What she learned made her sick to her core. The council had known. They had known about the void swarm for cycles. Long-range sensors had detected the approaching threat over 50 standard cycles ago, but the information had been classified at the highest levels. The swarm's trajectory had been calculated and recalculated. It would pass through the outer spiral arm, devastating dozens of systems before continuing into the void between galaxies. The core worlds, where all the Council species resided, would be spared. So the Council had made a decision. They would say nothing. They would do nothing. They would let the swarm consume the outer territories while the core worlds remained safe. It was a simple calculation. The lives of billions of lesser species weighed against the security and comfort of the elite. The math was clear, at least to them. Humanity had been granted provisional membership precisely because their world lay in the swarm's path. The Council wanted observation posts. They wanted data on how the swarm hunted, fed, and moved. Earth would provide that data. The humans themselves were simply acceptable losses. Stood outside the chamber doors as the council members filed out. Paused when he saw her, his 4 eyes narrowing with displeasure. "The council has reached a decision," he announced. "The request for evacuation assistance is, the situation with the void swarm is being monitored, and appropriate measures are being taken to ensure galactic security." "What measures?" demanded. "What are you doing to help Earth?" "We are establishing a quarantine zone around the outer spiral arm," said smoothly, "to prevent the swarm from spreading beyond the affected region." "That is not help, that is abandonment." "It is pragmatism, Ambassador. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. Earth's sacrifice will provide valuable data that will help us protect the rest of the galaxy." Earth's sacrifice could barely contain her rage. "You are talking about 12 billion people, 12 billion lives, and you are going to let them die to gather data." "The Council has spoken," said with finality. "The matter is closed." But the matter was not closed, not for humanity. The news of the Council's decision reached Earth within hours. Secretary General Marsh received the transmission in her command bunker beneath the ruins of Geneva. The old United Nations headquarters had been the first target of the swarm's advanced scouts. They had struck without warning, reducing the historic buildings to rubble before human forces could respond. Marsh read the Council's response 3 times, certain she must be misunderstanding. When the meaning finally sank in, she felt something cold settle in her chest. Not despair, something harder, something darker. "They knew," she said quietly. "The Council knew the swarm was coming. They knew and they said nothing." General stood beside her, his weathered face grim. "Our intelligence was correct then. The provisional membership was never about including us in the galactic community. It was about using us as a buffer zone." "As a sacrifice," Marsh corrected. "They put observation satellites in our system. They wanted to watch us die." "What are your orders, Madam Secretary?" Marsh was silent for a long moment. Around her, the bunker hummed with activity. Thousands of people worked at stations, coordinating evacuation efforts, military deployments, and civilian shelters. They were doing everything they could with the resources they had, but it would not be enough, not against the void swarm. Unless, General Marsh said slowly, how long until the swarm reaches Earth? 63 hours at current rate of advance. They have finished with Jupiter and are moving toward Mars. And our long-range weapon systems, the ones we were told to dismantle when we joined the Council. His eyes widened with understanding. The Council demanded we eliminate our nuclear arsenal and our experimental weapons programs. They said it was a condition of membership. They lied about the swarm, they lied about protecting us. I think it is safe to assume they lied about everything. Marsh turned to face her general directly. I am asking you, the weapons, do we still have them? A slow smile spread across face. It was not a pleasant smile. It was the smile of a predator that had just realized it was not as helpless as its enemies believed. Madam Secretary, he said, we are humans, we never throw anything away. Deep beneath the mountains of Switzerland, in tunnels that officially did not exist, humanity's forbidden weapons waited. Nuclear warheads by the thousands, antimatter containment vessels, kinetic impact devices capable of accelerating projectiles to a fraction of light speed, and something else, something that had never been tested, something that human scientists had created in secret laboratories, hidden from the Council's prying eyes. They called it the Prometheus Array. It was a network of satellites designed to focus solar energy into concentrated beams capable of cutting through anything. Rock, metal, even the dense biological armor of void swarm entities. The Council had specifically forbidden research into directed energy weapons of this magnitude. They had claimed such weapons were too dangerous to exist. But humans had built them anyway, because humans did not trust easily, because humans had learned, through thousands of years of bitter experience, that promises of protection were often lies, because deep in their collective memory, humans remembered what it meant to be prey, and they had sworn never to be prey again. Within hours of receiving the Council's response, humanity began to mobilize, not for evacuation, not for surrender, for war. The decision was not made lightly. Secretary General Marsh addressed the United Earth Parliament in an emergency session broadcast to every corner of the planet. She told them the truth, all of it, the Council's deception, the approaching swarm, the impossible odds they faced. We have a choice, she said. We can spend our final hours in prayer and panic, hoping for a miracle that will not come, or we can fight. Not because we are certain of victory, not because the odds favor us, but because we are human, and humans do not go quietly into the night. The vote was unanimous. Earth would fight. In orbit above the planet, humanity's fleet began to gather. It was not an impressive force by galactic standards. 37 warships, most of them converted cargo vessels hastily fitted with weapons and armor. They would face billions of swarm entities. The mathematical outcome was clear. Admiral Sarah stood on the bridge of the flagship Unity, watching the display screens fill with approaching darkness. The swarm had finished with Mars. It was spreading out now, thinning into a wall of hungry shadows that stretched across millions of kilometers. Admiral, her tactical officer, reported, swarm advance elements will reach Earth orbit in 12 hours. Status of the Prometheus Array. Fully charged and standing by. We have 93% coverage of orbital space. And the ground-based defenses. All missile batteries are armed. Kinetic launchers are primed. We have approximately 40,000 defensive installations worldwide. Nodded slowly. 40,000 installations, 37 ships, against an enemy that numbered in the billions. She should have been afraid. She should have been preparing her final messages to loved ones, making peace with her mortality. Instead, she felt something unexpected. Excitement. The kind of excitement that came from facing impossible odds and refusing to accept defeat. Open a channel, she ordered. All ships and ground installations. The communication officer nodded. Channel open, Admiral. This is Admiral to all forces, she began. In a few hours, we will face the greatest threat humanity has ever known. The Void Swarm has consumed worlds. It has destroyed civilizations that lasted for millions of years. It is coming for Earth, and it expects us to die." She paused, letting her words sink in. "The Galactic Council expects us to die too. They placed bets on our destruction. They sold tickets to watch our extinction. They think humans are weak. They think we are primitive. They think we are prey." Her voice hardened. "Let us show them how wrong they are. Every weapon fired, every swarm entity destroyed, every hour we survive beyond their predictions is a message to the galaxy. Humanity does not surrender. Humanity does not give up. And humanity does not die easily. Make them pay for every inch of space. Make them remember this day forever. Because whether we win or lose, the galaxy will never forget what happened here." The response came from every ship, every installation, every soldier waiting for battle. For Earth, for humanity, no surrender. The first wave hit at 3:47 hours GMT. Millions of swarm entities poured through the outer defensive perimeter, their massive bodies blotting out the stars. They moved with terrible purpose, drawn by the electromagnetic signatures of human technology and the biological signals of human life. The Prometheus array fired first. Beams of concentrated solar energy sliced through the darkness, cutting through swarm entities like hot knives through butter. Each beam destroyed hundreds of targets per second. The swarm recoiled, momentarily confused by this unexpected resistance. Then the missiles came, thousands of them, erupting from orbital platforms and ground-based launchers. Nuclear warheads detonated in precise patterns, creating overlapping spheres of destruction that vaporized entire clusters of swarm entities. The darkness burned. But still the swarm came. For every entity destroyed, 10 more took its place. They adapted quickly, learning to dodge the energy beams, to absorb the nuclear blasts. They were a species evolved for consumption, and they had consumed civilizations far more advanced than humanity. The human fleet met them head-on. The Unity led the charge, its main batteries firing continuously as smaller swarm entities swarmed around it like insects around a light. Admiral stood at the center of controlled chaos, issuing orders with calm precision. "Concentrate fire on the larger entities," she commanded. "They seem to be directing the smaller ones." She was right. The swarm operated with a hive mind, and the larger creatures served as relay points for that collective consciousness. When a command entity fell, the swarm units around it became disorganized, easier to pick off. But humanity was paying a price. The destroyer Resilience was the first to fall, its hull breached by a coordinated attack from dozens of swarm entities. The crew fought to the last moment, their weapons still firing as the ship was torn apart. The cruiser Defiance followed, then the corvette Swift and Vengeance. 8 hours into the battle, humanity had lost half its fleet. The swarm had lost millions of entities. By any reasonable calculation, it was a massacre. But the swarm had not broken through. Earth's orbital space remained defended. "Admiral," the tactical officer reported, his voice cracking with exhaustion, "we are detecting a new formation approaching from the swarm's rear elements. It is massive." The display screens updated and felt her heart stop. A single entity was emerging from the depths of the swarm. It was the size of a small moon, its surface covered with countless mouths and feeding tendrils. This was not merely a command entity. This was the swarm's queen, the central intelligence that controlled billions of lesser creatures. "The council files mention nothing about a queen," someone whispered. "Of course not," said bitterly. "They wanted us to die quickly." The queen moved toward Earth with terrible inevitability. Lesser entities parted before it like water before a ship. It was the embodiment of hunger, the heart of the swarm, and it had come to feast. "All remaining ships," ordered, "concentrate fire on the queen, everything we have." The Unity turned to face the approaching monster, its weapons blazing. Energy beams and missiles and kinetic rounds slammed into the Queen's body. The creature barely seemed to notice. Its hide was kilometers thick, evolved to withstand the heat of stars. "Admiral," the communication officer said suddenly, "we are receiving a transmission from ground control." "Put it through." Secretary General Marsh appeared on the screen. Her face was pale, but her eyes burned with determination. "Admiral, we have a plan, but we need you to clear a path." "A path to what?" "To the Queen's mouth." Stared at the display for a long moment. Then she began to laugh. It was not the laughter of despair. It was the laughter of someone who had just realized that her species was absolutely insane. "Ground control," she said. "You have your path. All ships form up on the Unity. We are going in." The final charge of humanity's fleet would be remembered in songs and stories across the galaxy for thousands of years. 17 battered warships, crewed by exhausted men and women who knew they were flying to their deaths, hurled themselves directly at the swarm queen. They did not try to survive. They did not try to escape. They simply flew forward, weapons blazing, clearing a corridor through the swarm. Ships fell one by one, the cruiser Hope, the destroyer Courage, the frigates Faith and Freedom. Each sacrifice bought a few more kilometers, a few more seconds. And then, through the carnage, something emerged from Earth's atmosphere. A single ship, small and fast, accelerating at speeds that should have killed everyone aboard. It shot through the gap created by the fleet's sacrifice, heading directly for the Queen's largest mouth. Admiral watched it go, her ship crumbling around her. "What is that?" she asked. "Project Prometheus, Phase 2, Marsh's voice answered through the static. "We call it the... It is carrying 100 antimatter warheads and the core of an experimental fusion reactor when it reaches the Queen's digestive system." She did not need to finish. Understood. The Queen fed by breaking down matter at the atomic level, but antimatter and unstable fusion cores were not normal matter. They were bombs waiting to explode. They disappeared into the Queen's mouth. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the Queen began to glow from within, brighter and brighter until it was impossible to look at directly. The explosion was visible from Earth's surface. A new sun bloomed in the night sky, burning with the fury of a star's heart. The Queen was not merely destroyed. She was annihilated, vaporized, erased from existence. And with her died the swarm's controlling intelligence. The effect was immediate. Billions of swarm entities, suddenly cut off from their guiding mind, went mad. They turned on each other, attacking blindly without direction or purpose. The organized threat became chaos. Admiral, bleeding from a dozen wounds on her shattered bridge, watched the swarm tear itself apart. She began to laugh again, and this time tears streamed down her face. "We did it," she whispered. "We actually did it." On Earth, Secretary General Marsh stood outside her bunker for the first time in days. The sky was filled with falling stars as swarm entities burned up in the atmosphere. Around her, people were emerging from shelters, looking up at the impossible sight. They had been told they would die. They had been abandoned by the galaxy, and they had survived. "Madam Secretary," an aide reported, "we are receiving transmissions from the Galactic Council. They wish to speak with you." Marsh was silent for a long moment. Then she smiled. It was not a friendly smile. "Tell them to wait," she said. "Tell them humanity is busy. We have wounded to tend and dead to honor. We will contact them when we are ready." "And when will that be, Madam Secretary?" Marsh looked up at the sky, at the burning remnants of the swarm that had tried to consume her world. She thought about the Council's betrayal, their lies, their willingness to sacrifice billions of lives for their own comfort. "When we are ready," she repeated, "and not a moment before." The galaxy had lied to humanity. The galaxy had left them to die. And humanity had proven, in fire and blood and sacrifice, that it did not need the galaxy's help. But this was only the beginning, because humanity had learned something important from this experience. They had learned that they could not trust the galactic community. They had learned that the only protection they could rely on was their own, and they had learned that they were far more dangerous than anyone had suspected. The Galactic Council had created a monster by trying to destroy it. Now they would have to live with the consequences. In the ruins of Geneva, Secretary General Marsh began planning for the future, a future where humanity would never again be at the mercy of others, a future where Earth would take its place among the stars. Not as a provisional member, not as an observer, not as prey, but as a power to be feared. The swarm's death had sent shockwaves through the galaxy. Worlds that had never heard of Earth before were suddenly whispering the planet's name. A species that had been considered primitive had done what the Galactic Council claimed was impossible. They had killed a void swarm queen. They had broken a force of nature. And they had done it alone. In the council chambers, panic was beginning to set in. High Chancellor had called an emergency session, but no one knew what to say. The carefully constructed narrative of human inferiority had been shattered. The lie they had told themselves and the galaxy was exposed. "We must act quickly," insisted. "We must bring humanity back under control before they become a threat." "And how do you propose we do that?" asked coldly. She had forced her way into the emergency session and no one had dared to remove her. "We abandoned them. We lied to them. We tried to use them as sacrificial lambs. Do you really think they will forget that?" "They are still primitive," a delegate clicked nervously. "They do not have faster-than-light travel. They are contained in their own system." "They did not have directed energy weapons either," pointed out. "According to our intelligence, yet they built the Prometheus array. They did not have antimatter technology, yet they destroyed a swarm queen with antimatter warheads. Perhaps we should reconsider our assessment of human capabilities." "What would you have us do?" demanded. "Apologize?" "Yes," said simply. "I would have you apologize. I would have you beg for their forgiveness. Because if you do not, I believe we will all live to regret it." But the council did not apologize. They were too proud, too certain of their own superiority. Instead, they voted to increase the quarantine around the outer spiral arm. They voted to monitor human communications. They voted to prepare for potential hostile action. They voted to treat humanity as an enemy. It was the worst decision they ever made. 3 standard cycles passed after the swarm's destruction. In that time, the galaxy watched Earth with a mixture of fear and fascination. The primitive world that should have been consumed had instead become a symbol, a reminder that the Galactic Council was not as powerful as it pretended to be, that the old order could be challenged. On Earth, things had changed dramatically. The emergency government had become permanent. Secretary General Helena Marsh had been elected to a new position, one with far more authority than any human leader had ever held. She was now the planetary director, commander of all Earth's military and scientific resources. Her first act had been to declassify everything. Every secret project, every hidden weapon, every piece of technology that humanity had developed in the shadows. The people deserved to know what their government had been doing in their name. More importantly, the galaxy needed to know that Earth was not to be underestimated. The second act was more ambitious. Marsh commissioned the construction of a new fleet, not 37 converted cargo ships, a real fleet designed from the ground up for combat. Within 2 cycles, Earth's orbital shipyards had produced over 200 vessels, each one incorporating lessons learned from the swarm battle. The third act was the most provocative. Marsh announced the formation of the Terran Space Force, a unified military command dedicated to protecting Earth and its interests throughout the galaxy. The Council had specifically forbidden member worlds from maintaining independent military forces. Earth was no longer a member world. Earth no longer cared what the Council forbade. Admiral had survived the battle, though she had spent 6 months in medical recovery. The doctors had replaced her left arm with a cybernetic prosthetic and repaired the internal damage from decompression exposure. She had emerged harder than before, forged in the same fire that had transformed humanity. Now she stood on the bridge of the new flagship, the Prometheus. It was 10 times the size of the old Unity, armed with weapons that made the original Prometheus array look like a flashlight. Around her, a fleet of warships held formation, waiting for orders. Director Marsh is transmitting, her communication officer reported. Put her through. Marsh's face appeared on the main display. She looked older than she had 3 cycles ago, the weight of leadership carved into her features, but her eyes still burned with the same determination. Admiral, the Council has issued another ultimatum. They demand that we dismantle our fleet, surrender our weapons technology, and accept a permanent oversight committee on Earth. And if we refuse, they have threatened economic sanctions, trade embargoes, possible military intervention. Laughed. It was a cold sound devoid of humor. Military intervention. With what forces? The Council species have not fought a real war in 10,000 cycles. They have forgotten what combat looks like. I suspect they are about to be reminded, Marsh said. The intelligence reports indicate they are assembling a task force. 12 capital ships from the Dominion, supported by lighter elements from the End. Time until they reach our system. 37 standard days, assuming they use the main hyperspace corridors. Studied the star chart displayed on her tactical screen. 37 days, enough time to prepare, enough time to plan. They expect us to wait for them, she mused. They expect us to cower in our system. Hopping their fleet will not be too harsh. Yes, they do. Then let us disappoint them. Turn to her navigation officer. Plot a course for the system, best possible speed. The officer hesitated. Admiral, the system is 17 light-years away. We do not have faster-than-light capability. We did not, corrected. Check your classified database, Lieutenant. Authorization Prometheus 7. The officer's eyes widened as he accessed the restricted files. What he found there made his hands shake. Admiral, this is impossible. Many things about humanity are impossible, said with grim satisfaction. We do them anyway. The secret of faster-than-light travel had been unlocked 6 months after the swarm battle. Human scientists, working with salvaged swarm tissue and captured alien technology, had cracked the basic principles of hyperspace navigation. They had not merely existing designs. They had improved upon them. The Council's fastest ships could cross 10 light-years in a single jump. Human prototype drives could do 50. It was supposed to remain secret for at least another cycle, until the fleet was fully equipped with the new engines. But circumstances had forced an acceleration of the timeline. If the Council wanted war, humanity would bring the war to them. The Prometheus and its accompanying fleet vanished from Earth's orbital space in a flash of displaced energy. They reappeared in the system 3 days later, having crossed 17 light-years in a fraction of the time the Council thought possible. Was a minor colony world, home to approximately 50 million citizens. It was also a major supply depot for the task force assembling to attack Earth. Warehouses full of weapons, fuel, and equipment lined the planet's orbital stations. The defense forces detected the human fleet immediately. Panic spread through their ranks. How had the humans arrived so quickly? How had they known where to find the supply depot? The questions were still being asked when the first missiles hit. Admiral had given specific orders. No civilian targets, no unnecessary destruction. This was not a massacre. This was a message. The supply depots burned. Fuel reserves ignited in spectacular explosions that lit up the system like fireworks. Weapon stockpiles were vaporized. The small defense fleet that attempted to intervene was systematically disabled. their engines and weapons destroyed but their life support systems carefully preserved. The entire operation lasted 4 hours. When it was over, the Council's planned assault on Earth had been crippled. Months of accumulated supplies had been reduced to expanding clouds of debris, and humanity had proven that it could strike anywhere, anytime, without warning. Broadcast a message on all frequencies before departing. This is Admiral Sarah of the Terran Space Force. We did not start this conflict. We did not ask for war, but we will not be victims. We will not be prey. The Galactic Council abandoned us to die. Now they will learn that some prey bites back. This facility has been destroyed because it was preparing for an unprovoked attack on Earth. Any further hostile action against our world will be met with overwhelming force. You have been warned. The fleet jumped away before any response could come. They left behind a shattered supply depot and a terrified colony that had just witnessed the impossible. News of the attack spread through the galaxy like wildfire. The Council tried to suppress the information, but it was too big, too dramatic to contain. Amateur recordings of the battle appeared on communication networks throughout known space. Billions of beings watched as human warships tore through defenses with casual ease. The psychological impact was enormous. For thousands of cycles, the Council had maintained peace through the threat of overwhelming force. No species dared challenge the combined military might of the core worlds. But now, a single planet had done exactly that. And they had won. On a dozen worlds, revolutionary movements began to stir. Species that had long chafed under Council domination suddenly found hope. If humanity could defy the old order, perhaps they could too. High Chancellor convened an emergency session of the full Council. The mood was grim. Several delegates had not bothered to attend, citing various excuses that fooled no one. The coalition was already beginning to fracture. We must respond with force, insisted. If we allow this attack to go unanswered, we appear weak. Other species will be emboldened. With what force? Demanded. She had earned a seat at the main table through sheer persistence and the respect she had gained by predicting exactly this outcome. The humans destroyed our supply depot. They have faster-than-light technology that surpasses our own. They have weapons we do not understand. How do you propose we defeat them? They are one world against the entire galaxy, a delegate clicked angrily. Numbers alone will overwhelm them. Numbers did not save us from the Void Swarm, pointed out. The humans killed a swarm queen. They did what we claimed was impossible. Perhaps we should stop underestimating them. What would you have us do? Asked bitterly. Surrender, accept that these primitives have defeated us. I would have you negotiate, said. I would have you treat humanity as equals with legitimate grievances that deserve to be addressed. We lied to them. We abandoned them. We tried to use them as sacrifices. Is it any wonder they no longer trust us? Trust is irrelevant, snapped. Power is what matters, and we have more power than Earth. Do we? Leaned forward. The humans survived a Void Swarm attack that would have annihilated any of our worlds. They developed faster-than-light technology in less than 3 cycles. They crossed 17 light-years and destroyed a fortified supply depot without losing a single ship. I do not think we understand their power at all. The debate continued for hours, but no consensus emerged. The Council was divided between those who wanted war and those who recognized that war might be unwinnable. In the end, they compromised on the worst possible option. They decided to do nothing and hoped the situation resolved itself. It did not resolve itself. 6 months after the raid, humanity struck again. This time the target was this primary communication hub. The facility was responsible for coordinating information across space, connecting colonies and outposts to the central government. It was also heavily defended, protected by 3 orbital battle stations and a permanent garrison of warships. The human fleet appeared without warning, emerging from hyperspace at point-blank range. The battle stations had approximately 90 seconds to realize they were under attack before they were destroyed. The garrison fleet fared slightly better, managing to launch fighters before being systematically crippled. Once again, forces were precise in their destruction. The communication hub was obliterated, cutting the collective off from its outer territories. But civilian populations were left untouched. Ships were disabled, not destroyed. The message was clear. Humanity could have killed millions. They chose not to. "We are not monsters," broadcast before departing. "We do not slaughter innocents, but we will not tolerate threats against our world." This facility was coordinating the tracking of human ships. That coordination has now ended. Further hostile intelligence operations against Earth will be met with further consequences. They screamed for retaliation, but their fleet was in disarray, their communications shattered. By the time they could organize a response, the human ships had long since vanished into hyperspace. The pattern continued over the following cycles. Human fleets appeared without warning, struck military targets with surgical precision, and disappeared before effective resistance could be mounted. They never targeted civilians. They never caused unnecessary casualties, but they systematically dismantled the military infrastructure that threatened Earth. Shipyards were destroyed. Weapons factories were reduced to rubble. Fleet staging areas were raided and scattered. Every attempt to assemble a force capable of threatening Earth was disrupted before it could become operational. And with each attack, humanity's technology improved. They captured enemy vessels and reverse-engineered their systems. They studied alien weapons and developed countermeasures. They learned and adapted at a pace that terrified their enemies. The Galactic Council had expected to crush a primitive world. Instead, they found themselves fighting an enemy that grew stronger with every engagement. An enemy that seemed to anticipate their every move. An enemy that simply would not stop. On Earth, the population watched the war unfold with a mixture of pride and concern. They had never asked for conflict with the galaxy. They had wanted only to be left alone, to develop at their own pace, to find their place among the stars. But the Council had forced their hand, and now there was no going back. Director Marsh addressed the planet on the second anniversary of the Swarm battle. She spoke from the rebuilt United Nations Plaza in Geneva, surrounded by monuments to those who had fallen defending Earth. 2 years ago we faced extinction, she said. The Galactic Council abandoned us. They lied to us. They expected us to die quietly, to be consumed by the void swarm while they watched from safe distance. We did not die. We survived. We fought back. And we won. She paused, letting her words settle over the crowd and the billions watching across the planet. Since then, we have been forced to defend ourselves again and again. The Council cannot accept that we refuse to be victims. They cannot accept that their lies were exposed. So they have sent fleets against us. They have tried to destroy what they could not control, and every time we have pushed them back. But I want to be clear about something. We are not conquerors. We are not seeking empire. We do not want to rule the galaxy or dominate other species. We want only to live in peace, free from threats and lies. Every attack we have made has been in response to aggression against Earth. Every facility we have destroyed was preparing to attack our world. We have never struck first. We have only struck back. The Council has a choice. They can continue this futile war, spending lives and resources on a conflict they cannot win. Or they can accept that humanity will not be bullied, will not be intimidated, and will not surrender. They can negotiate a peace based on mutual respect and honest dealing. The choice is theirs. The speech was broadcast throughout the galaxy. It reached billions of beings who had only heard propaganda about the savage humans threatening galactic civilization. Many of them watched with new eyes, wondering if perhaps they had been lied to as well. On dozens of worlds, the seeds of change began to sprout. Species that had been oppressed by the Council for centuries saw an opportunity. If the Council could not defeat one rebellious world, Perhaps it was not as powerful as it claimed. Perhaps the old order could be challenged. The first to act were a reptilian species that had been subjugated by the 3,000 cycles earlier. Their uprising began on the industrial world of Prime, where workers seized control of weapons factories and declared independence from the Dominion. They responded with typical brutality, dispatching a military force to crush the rebellion. They expected an easy victory. They had no fleet, no heavy weapons, no experience in warfare. They did not expect the human ships that appeared as the fleet entered orbit. Admiral had been monitoring the situation carefully. She had no orders to intervene in alien affairs. Earth's official policy was strict non-interference, but she also had considerable discretion in how she interpreted her mission to protect human interests. They have requested asylum, she told Director Marsh via secure communication. 3 million of them want to emigrate to human space. And you want to extract them. I want to give them a choice. They are going to slaughter them. Every man, woman, and child on that planet will be killed as an example to other would-be rebels. We can stop that. Marsh was silent for a long moment. This would be a significant escalation. We would be directly opposing the Council in a conflict that does not involve Earth. Respectfully, Director, every conflict in this galaxy involves Earth now. We have shown that the Council can be. We are the reason they found the courage to revolt. If we abandon them to massacre, we abandon everything we claim to stand for. And if we save them, we set a precedent. Every oppressed species in the galaxy will look to us for protection. Yes, agreed, they will. Another long pause. Then Marsh smiled, a hint of her old fire returning. Do it, she said. But Admiral, do not lose any ships. We cannot afford to appear weak. I never intend to lose, Director. The Battle of Prime lasted 6 hours. It began when the fleet entered orbit and ended when the last warship jumped away in retreat, leaving behind the burning wrecks of its companions. Human casualties. 0 ships lost, minimal damage to the fleet. Casualties. 17 ships destroyed, 23 disabled, 3 captured intact. The disparity was staggering. They were a warrior species, proud of their military heritage. They had not lost a naval engagement in over 1,000 cycles, and they had just been humiliated by an enemy they had dismissed as primitive. But the battle's outcome was less important than what happened afterward. Human transports descended to Prime, evacuating 3 million refugees under the protection of the Terran fleet. It was the largest humanitarian operation in human history, and it was broadcast live to every world in the galaxy. The images were powerful. Human soldiers helping alien civilians board evacuation shuttles. Human medics treating wounded rebels, human ships standing between a defenseless population and an enemy fleet. This was not the behavior of monsters or savages. This was something the galaxy had not seen in thousands of cycles. This was compassion. They were resettled on Mars, which had been slowly terraformed in the aftermath of the swarm attack. They became the first alien species to be granted citizenship in human territories. Others would follow. The Council watched these developments with growing alarm. Human influence was spreading far faster than their military victories suggested. Species that had never met a human were beginning to speak favorably about Earth. Revolutionary movements were adopting human tactics and strategies. The entire galactic order was shifting. Called another emergency session. This time, fewer delegates attended than ever before. Some were too busy dealing with unrest in their own territories. Others had quietly begun reaching out to human diplomats, exploring the possibility of separate peace agreements. We are losing, admitted, his voice heavy with defeat. Not the war we could survive. We are losing the narrative. The other species no longer fear us. They see humanity defying us and thriving. They want what humanity has. And what is that? Asked. "Freedom," a new voice answered. The chamber fell silent as a human stepped forward. He was an older man, gray-haired and weathered, wearing the simple uniform of the Terran Diplomatic Corps. His name was James, and he was the son of General who had helped organize humanity's resistance against the swarm. "Ambassador," said stiffly, "you were not invited to this session." "I invited myself. My government felt it was time we had a direct conversation," looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of each delegate in turn. "You have been trying to destroy us for 3 cycles now. It has not worked. Your fleets are scattered. Your territories are in rebellion. Your allies are abandoning you. How much longer do you intend to continue this futile struggle?" "You are the aggressors," a delegate protested. "You attacked our systems. You destroyed our infrastructure." "After you left us to die," replied calmly. "After you lied about the Void Swarm. After you used our world as a testing ground for your defensive strategies. We did not start this conflict. We simply refused to be your victims." "What do you want?" asked. "What we have always wanted: peace, recognition, the right to exist without threats hanging over our world. We are not interested in conquest. We do not want your territories or your resources. We want only to be treated as equals." "And if we refuse?" Smiled. It was not a threatening expression, but it carried weight. "Then we will continue as we have been. We will defend ourselves against every attack. We will support every species seeking freedom from your oppression. We will dismantle your military capability piece by piece until you have no choice but to accept reality. The galaxy is changing, High Chancellor. You can either adapt to that change or be swept away by it." "Those sound like threats." "They are facts. Humanity did not choose this path. You forced us onto it when you abandoned us to the swarm. Now you must deal with the consequences," spread his hands in a gesture of openness. "But we would prefer peace. We would prefer cooperation. There are threats in this galaxy far greater than our disagreements. The Void Swarm Queen is dead, but the swarm itself still exists in the outer reaches. Other dangers lurk in the darkness between stars. We should be allies, not enemies." Hesitated. For the first time since the crisis began, he seemed genuinely uncertain. "What guarantees would Earth offer?" he asked finally. "How can we trust you not to exact revenge for our past actions?" "You cannot," admitted. "Just as we cannot trust you not to betray us again, but we can build trust through actions, step by step, agreement by agreement. We can start small and grow from there, or we can continue fighting until one side or the other is destroyed. The choice is yours." The debate that followed lasted for 3 days. Old grievances were aired. Accusations flew back and forth. Several delegates stormed out in anger, only to return hours later. It was messy and contentious and often seemed on the verge of collapse. But in the end, a framework emerged. Not a treaty, not yet, but an agreement to talk, an acknowledgement that the current path led only to mutual destruction, a first step toward something better. The Accords, as they came to be known, established basic principles for future negotiations. Humanity would cease offensive operations against Council targets. The Council would withdraw all military forces from the outer spiral arm. Both sides would exchange ambassadors and establish formal diplomatic relations. It was not peace, not exactly, but it was an end to active hostilities, a chance to breathe, a foundation on which something lasting might eventually be built. When the Accords were announced, celebrations erupted across Earth. After 3 cycles of constant vigilance and fear, people finally allowed themselves to hope. The war was not over, but it was pausing, and sometimes a pause was all that was needed. Director Marsh stood in her office, watching the celebrations through the window. Behind her, the holographic display showed similar scenes from across human space. Mars, the orbital stations, the new colonies being established on the moons of Jupiter and Saturn. Everywhere people were rejoicing. Admiral entered without knocking. They had long since dispensed with formalities between them. You look troubled, observed. We won, we should be celebrating. We did not win, Marsh said quietly. We survived. We forced them to the table, but nothing has truly changed. The council still exists. The same species that abandoned us still hold power. The moment they think they can defeat us, they will try again. Then we will beat them again. For how long? How many generations must we spend preparing for wars? How many children must grow up learning to fight instead of learning to dream? Marsh turned to face her old friend. I wanted humanity to reach the stars, to explore, to discover, to build. Instead, we have become warriors. Was silent for a moment. Then she stepped forward and placed her hand on Marsh's shoulder. We became what we needed to become, she said gently. We had no choice, but that does not mean we must remain warriors forever. The galaxy is changing. We are changing it. In time, perhaps we can be something more. Something more. Teachers, guides, the species that showed the galaxy a new way, smiled. They already look to us as liberators. Others will follow. We can shape what comes next. We can build the galaxy we want to live in. Marsh considered this for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. You are right. The Council's era is ending. What replaces it is up to us. She straightened, some of her old determination returning. Very well. Let us begin building that future, but we will keep our weapons close just in case. Always agreed. We are human after all. We never throw anything away. Both women laughed at that. It was an old joke, one that had taken on new meaning over the past 3 cycles. Humanity's tendency to hoard and stockpile had saved their species from extinction. It had given them the tools to defy a galaxy. Now it would help them reshape that galaxy into something better. Outside, the celebrations continued. Fireworks lit up the night sky over every major city on Earth. Ships in orbit flashed their running lights in coordinated displays. Music and laughter echoed through streets that had been silent with fear just days before. Humanity had survived. Against all odds, against all expectations, against enemies both ancient and new. They had proven that they were more than the primitive curiosity the galaxy had dismissed. They were survivors, fighters, builders. And they were just getting started. Far away in the outer reaches of the galaxy, something stirred. The remnants of the void swarm, scattered and directionless since their queen's death, began to move with new purpose. Somewhere in the endless dark, a new intelligence was emerging, learning, growing, remembering. The swarm had been defeated, but it had not been destroyed, and it never forgot. The galaxy's troubles were far from over. But for now, for this moment, humanity celebrated. They had earned it. 10 standard cycles had passed since the Accords. The galaxy had changed beyond recognition. The old council still existed in name, but its power had faded like morning frost beneath the sun. Where once it commanded absolute obedience, now it negotiated and compromised. Where once it dictated terms, now it requested considerations. Humanity had grown in ways no one could have predicted. Earth remained the sacred and protected, but human colonies now dotted dozens of systems. Mars had been fully terraformed, its red deserts transformed into forests and oceans. The moons of Jupiter hosted massive industrial complexes. The asteroid belt had been carved into shipyards capable of producing 100 vessels per cycle. And humans were no longer alone in their expansion. They had integrated fully into Terran society, their engineering talents complementing human creativity in remarkable ways. Another species freed from council oppression brought their expertise in medicine and biotechnology. A dozen other species had joined the growing alliance, drawn by humanity's reputation for fair dealing and fierce protection. They called it the Terran Coalition, though humans made up only a fraction of its population. It was not an empire. It was something new, something the galaxy had never seen before. A voluntary union of equals, bound together by shared values rather than force. Director Helena Marsh had retired 5 cycles ago, passing leadership to a new generation. She spent her days in a small house overlooking the Swiss Alps, writing memoirs and advising her successors when asked. The scars of the Swarm War and everything that followed had never fully healed, but she had found a measure of peace. Admiral Sarah still served, though she had passed command of the main fleet to younger officers. Her title now was Strategic Advisor, a position that gave her influence without the burden of direct responsibility. She spent most of her time at the academy, training the next generation of human warriors. The galaxy had settled into an uneasy balance. The Council controlled the core worlds and their immediate territories. The Coalition dominated the outer spiral arm and had established footholds in several other regions. Between them lay a vast neutral zone, patrolled by ships from both sides but belonging to neither. It was not quite peace. Tensions flared periodically, border disputes arose, diplomatic incidents tested the patience of both sides, but open warfare had not returned. For 10 cycles, the guns had remained silent. That silence was about to end. The first warning came from the Deep Space Monitoring Station at the edge of explored space. Lieutenant Commander Torres was on duty when the sensors began screaming alerts. She stared at the readings for a long moment, certain there must be some mistake. "Get me Coalition Command," she ordered. "Priority Alpha, immediate." The message reached Earth within minutes, relayed through a network of communication beacons that humanity had constructed throughout their territory. It arrived at Coalition headquarters just as the morning shift was changing, throwing the entire command structure into chaos. Admiral James, son of the late general and nephew of the diplomat who had negotiated the accords, received the report in his office. He read it 3 times before activating his emergency communication system. "All fleet commanders, this is Admiral. We have a confirmed sighting of Void Swarm activity in the outer reaches. I repeat, the Void Swarm is active. All units are to assume defensive positions immediately. This is not a drill." The words sent shockwaves through the Coalition. For 10 cycles, the Swarm had been little more than a distant memory. Yes, they knew remnants existed somewhere in the dark between galaxies. Yes, they maintained patrols and early warning systems, but somehow they had convinced themselves that the threat had passed, that killing the Queen had ended the danger forever. They were wrong. The Swarm had not been idle during those 10 cycles. Far from the eyes of the galaxy, a new queen had emerged. She had been a small larva when her predecessor died, hidden deep within a carrier entity that had escaped the battle for Earth. For 10 cycles she had grown, fed, learned. And she had studied her mother's killer. This new queen was different from those that had come before. Previous queens had been forces of pure instinct, driven by hunger and nothing else. This one had evolved something unprecedented among her kind: strategy, patience, a desire for revenge. She had watched the galaxy from the shadows, gathering information through scout entities that moved unseen along the dark paths between stars. She had learned about humanity and their coalition. She had studied their weapons, their tactics, their strengths and weaknesses, and she had prepared. When her swarm finally emerged from hiding, it was not as a mindless wave of destruction. It was as an army. The first target was a Coalition research station on the edge of explored space. The attack came without warning, the swarm dropping out of hyperspace in formations that mimicked human fleet tactics. The station's defenders barely had time to send a distress signal before they were overwhelmed. But they did send it, and that signal told the Coalition everything they needed to know. "They are using coordinated attack patterns," Admiral reported to the Emergency Council convened in Geneva. The old city had been rebuilt after the swarm scouts destroyed it during the First War, transformed into a symbol of human resilience. Now it served as the Coalition's capital. They are not attacking randomly. They are targeting specific systems in a specific order. "An intelligent swarm," Director said slowly. He was a young man for his position, chosen for his sharp mind and decisive nature. That should not be possible. Neither was killing a swarm queen, said. She had been summoned from the academy when the crisis began, her experience too valuable to ignore. We changed the rules once. It seems the swarm learned to change them too. How many entities are we looking at? Asked. Activated a holographic display. The image that appeared made several people in the room gasp. Current estimates suggest approximately 50 billion combat-capable entities. That is roughly 10 times the size of the swarm we faced during the First War, and they are growing. Every system they consume adds to their numbers. 50 billion, repeated. Our entire fleet numbers less than 5,000 ships. The coalition fleet, corrected. We need to include our allies. Even with allies, we cannot match those numbers. We matched worse odds during the First War. And we nearly lost, pointed out. We survived by a miracle and a suicide run. We cannot count on such luck again. The debate continued for hours. Military commanders argued for defensive concentration, pulling all forces back to protect the most valuable systems. Diplomats suggested reaching out to the Council, setting aside old grievances in the face of common threat. Scientists proposed new weapons, new tactics, new technologies that might turn the tide. Through it all, remained silent. She listened to every proposal, every argument, every desperate hope, and she saw the same flaw in all of them. "You are thinking like prey," she said finally. The room fell silent. Eyes turned toward the old admiral, the hero of the First Swarm War. "We are outnumbered," continued. "We are outmatched. Every calculation shows us losing. So you are trying to figure out how to survive, how to escape, how to minimize our losses." She shook her head. "That is exactly what the Council did 10 cycles ago. They tried to calculate their way to safety. They were willing to sacrifice billions of lives to protect themselves." "What would you have us do?" asked. "Stop trying to survive, start trying to win." Stood, activating her own data display. "This swarm is different from the first. It has intelligence, strategy. Those are advantages we did not face before, but they are also weaknesses." "How are intelligence and strategy weaknesses?" "Because they can be deceived. The first swarm was a force of nature. You cannot trick a hurricane, but an intelligent enemy can be led astray. They can be baited. They can make mistakes." Traced a pattern on the display highlighting systems along the swarm's projected path. "The new queen is targeting specific locations, valuable targets. That means she is making choices, and choices can be manipulated." The plan that emerged from the following discussions was audacious to the point of insanity. It required perfect coordination across dozens of systems. It demanded sacrifices that made hardened warriors flinch. And it relied on understanding an alien intelligence that had never existed before. But it was a plan, and for the first time since the crisis began, there was hope. The message was sent to every coalition world and every ally capable of receiving it. It reached human colonies on the frontier, industrial centers, medical facilities, settlements that had defected from the Council years earlier. It even reached the Council itself, transmitted through diplomatic channels that had remained open despite the ongoing tensions. "This is Director of the Terran Coalition. The Void Swarm has returned. They are stronger than before, smarter than before, and they are coming for all of us. Not just humanity, not just the Coalition. Everyone. The Swarm does not negotiate. They do not take prisoners. They do not spare the innocent. They consume everything in their path." 10 cycles ago, the Galactic Council abandoned Earth to die. They lied about the swarm's approach. They planned to sacrifice billions of humans to protect themselves. They were wrong then, and they would be wrong now if they tried the same strategy. The swarm will not stop at the outer territories. Once they have consumed the Coalition, they will move on to the core worlds. Nothing will be safe. I am calling for a united response. Not just the Coalition, but every species capable of fighting. Set aside old grudges. Forget past betrayals. We can settle our differences after we survive. Right now, we need every ship, every weapon, every warrior the galaxy can muster. Humanity did not ask for this war. We did not invite this enemy, but we will face it regardless. We faced it once before and won. We can do it again, but only if we stand together, only if we learn from the mistakes of the past, only if we choose to fight instead of hide. The swarm is coming. What will you do when they arrive? The response was not immediate. The council debated for days, old factions arguing old positions. Some wanted to dismiss the threat, claiming the coalition was exaggerating for political advantage. Others saw an opportunity to let humanity and the swarm destroy each other. But gradually, the reports from the front lines could not be ignored. System after system went dark. Refugee ships arrived at council ports with tales of horror. The swarm was coming, and it did not care about galactic politics. High Chancellor, old now and tired, convened what would be his final session. He looked around the chamber at faces that had grown familiar over decades of service. Some he trusted, most he did not. None of it mattered anymore. "I have spent my life maintaining the Council's power," he said quietly. "I have made decisions that cost lives. I have told lies to protect our interests. 10 cycles ago, I abandoned a world to die because I thought it was the pragmatic choice." He paused, gathering himself for what came next. "I was wrong, not just morally wrong, though I was certainly that. I was practically wrong, strategically wrong. By abandoning humanity, I created an enemy far more dangerous than any swarm. I turned potential allies into adversaries. I showed the galaxy that the Council could not be trusted. And now the swarm returns, and we face it without the allies we should have had, without the trust we should have built, without the strength we should have gathered." Stood slowly, his old joints protesting. "I am proposing that the Galactic Council formally ally with the Terran Coalition for the duration of this crisis. Full military cooperation, shared resources, joint command." The chamber erupted in protest. Such an alliance would mean admitting that the coalition was their equal. It would mean working alongside species they had oppressed for. It would mean trusting the humans they had tried to destroy. "And if we refuse," a delegate demanded, "what then?" "Then we die alone instead of surviving together." Looked directly at the delegate. "I have seen the projections. The swarm is not attacking the coalition first. They are moving in a pattern that will cut us off from the outer territories. They are isolating us. Whatever intelligence guides them now, it remembers how we hid during the First War. It knows we will not fight until we are forced to. So it is arranging things so that when we are finally forced, we will have no allies left." The vote was close. Centuries of pride and prejudice did not die easily. But in the end, survival proved more compelling than old grudges. The Galactic Council voted to ally with the Terran Coalition. The combined fleet that gathered at the Nexus Point was the largest military force the galaxy had ever assembled. Over 8,000 warships from dozens of species, ranging from massive Council dreadnoughts to nimble Coalition strike craft. They bristled with weapons representing every technological tradition in known space. Admiral commanded the combined force, a choice that had required delicate negotiation, but was ultimately accepted by all parties. His reputation for fairness and his family's history made him acceptable to both humans and aliens. More importantly, he had spent his career studying the swarm, preparing for this day. Sarah stood beside him on the command bridge of the new flagship, the Prometheus II. She was technically a civilian advisor, but her experience made her invaluable. No one alive had as much direct combat experience against the swarm as she did. "They are approaching from 3 vectors," reported as the final fleet elements took their positions. "Approximately 12 billion entities in the primary force, 8 billion in each flanking element. The Queen is holding back, protected by a reserve force of approximately 10 billion. She learned from her mother's mistake, observed. She is not going to expose herself early. Then we need to force her out, turned to his tactical display. Begin Phase 1. The battle began not with weapons, but with deception. Coalition, electronic warfare ships flooded space with false signals, creating phantom fleets and ghost targets. Council vessels with superior sensor capabilities tracked the swarm's response, learning their detection patterns and communication frequencies. For hours, the two forces probed each other without direct contact. The swarm advanced cautiously, wary of traps. The Allied fleet gave ground slowly, drawing the enemy deeper into the prepared. Then the first trap was sprung. A coalition carrier group, apparently isolated and vulnerable, found itself surrounded by a swarm detachment. The carrier broadcast distress signals, calling for help. More swarm entities diverted to the easy kill. They never saw the mines until it was too late. Space itself seemed to explode as thousands of concealed weapons detonated simultaneously. The mines had been seeded weeks earlier, hidden among the debris of dead systems. They unleashed a fury of nuclear fire, antimatter annihilation, and directed energy that vaporized millions of swarm entities in seconds. The carrier escaped, its crew celebrating as they watched the destruction behind them. The first blood had been drawn. But the Queen was not foolish. She recognized the trap for what it was and refused to commit her main forces to rescue the lost detachment. Instead, she adjusted her approach, sending expendable units ahead to trigger any remaining mines. The battle became a deadly game of move and countermove. Human tactics met alien cunning. Council technology merged with coalition innovation. For every trap the Allies set, the swarm found a counter. For every counter the swarm deployed, the Allies developed a response. Ships fell on both sides. The destroyer Remembrance was the first human vessel lost, overwhelmed by a concentrated swarm assault. The Council dreadnought Eternal Justice followed, its ancient hull torn apart by entities that had learned to target its weak points. Names that would be remembered for generations were added to the roll of honored dead. But the Allies held. Where the Council had failed alone, where humanity had barely survived alone, together they stood firm. The swarm's advance slowed, then it stopped. For the first time since the battle began, the enemy was not gaining ground. Watch the tactical display with growing hope. She is committing her reserves, he said. The Queen is bringing up her personal guard. She has too, replied. We have killed enough of her forces that she cannot achieve victory without direct involvement. She is being forced to take a risk. Then we proceed to Phase 3. Phase 3 was the most dangerous part of the plan. It required the Allied fleet to simulate a collapse, a retreat that would draw the Queen into pursuit. If the deception was too obvious, she would recognize it as a trap. If it was too convincing, the retreat might become real. The order went out to all commands. Ships began pulling back, their movements carefully choreographed to look like desperate flight. The swarm sensed weakness and surged forward. The Queen, confident now, moved with her guard to join the pursuit. Waited, the timing had to be perfect. Too early and the Queen would escape. Too late and the fleet would be destroyed before they could strike. Now said quietly, "All units execute Phase 3 terminal," ordered. The retreating fleet suddenly stopped. Engines reversed. Weapons powered up. And from hidden positions throughout fresh forces emerged. Reserve units that had been held back, concealed behind stealth fields and sensor shadows. They surrounded the Queen and her guard like a closing fist. The Queen understood immediately that she had been outmaneuvered. She tried to pull back to escape the trap, but the Allied fleet moved to block every avenue of retreat. For the first time in her existence, she felt something her kind had rarely experienced. Fear. The final assault was led by a small squadron of human ships, their crews volunteers who knew they might not survive. They carried a new weapon, developed in secret by coalition scientists who had spent 10 cycles studying the swarm. It was not a bomb or a beam. It was a virus. Biological warfare was forbidden by every treaty in galactic history. But humanity had learned during the First War that treaties meant nothing when survival was at stake, and they had learned something else during their study of captured swarm tissue. The swarm was not truly a collection of individual entities. It was one organism, spread across billions of bodies, united by a single consciousness. The Queen was the center of that consciousness, but she was not separate from it. She was connected to every entity in her swarm through biological quantum entanglement, which meant that anything that affected her would affect them all. The virus was designed to target that connection. It would not kill the Queen directly. Instead, it would scramble the signals that linked her to her swarm. It would turn her greatest strength into her greatest weakness. The human ships reached the Queen's outer guard. They did not try to fight their way through. Instead, they simply accelerated, their engines pushed beyond safe limits, their courses aimed directly at the Queen's massive body. The leading ship was called the Sacrifice. Its captain was a young woman named Sarah's granddaughter, who had grown up hearing stories of the First Swarm War. She had volunteered for this mission without hesitation. "Grandmother," she transmitted as her ship began its final approach, "tell them we did not do this for revenge. We did it for the future, for all the children who will never have to fear the swarm again." "I will tell them," Sarah replied, her voice breaking. "I will tell everyone." The Sacrifice struck the Queen's body at a significant fraction of. The impact itself would have been devastating, but it was the payload that mattered. The virus, contained in hardened canisters, was driven deep into the Queen's flesh. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the Queen began to scream. It was a sound that had never been heard before, broadcast on frequencies that every ship in the could detect. The Queen thrashed and writhed, her massive body convulsing as the virus spread through her system. And as it affected her swarm. Across the billions of entities suddenly lost their coordination. The hive mind that had guided them shattered into chaos. Swarm units turned on each other, attacking blindly without direction. Others simply stopped moving, their biological processes disrupted by the severed link to their Queen. The Allied fleet did not hesitate. They poured fire into the confused masses, destroying swarm entities by the millions. The battle became a massacre, though not of the kind the Queen had intended. Watch the destruction with grim satisfaction. All units continue engagement. No mercy, no hesitation. We end this today. The Queen died slowly. The virus was not designed to kill quickly. It was designed to ensure that her death would ripple through her entire swarm, eliminating any possibility of another successor emerging. It was cruel, perhaps, but humanity had learned that half measures against the swarm only delayed the inevitable. When she finally expired, the effect was instantaneous. Every remaining swarm entity in the simply stopped. Their biological functions ceased. Their bodies drifted, empty husks floating through space. The silence that followed was profound. For the first time in hours, no weapons fired, no ships exploded, no beings died. Then slowly, the cheering began. It started on the human ships, spreading to the coalition vessels, then to the council forces. Different species, different languages, different ways of expressing joy, but the message was the same. They had won. The aftermath of the battle was almost as challenging as the fight itself. Millions of dead swarm entities had to be cleared from shipping lanes. Damaged ships needed repair. Wounded crew required medical attention, and the political ramifications of the alliance had to be addressed. High Chancellor did not live to see the victory. He had suffered a cardiac event during the battle's climax, his ancient body finally giving out under the stress. His last words, recorded by his aides, were a request that his successor honor the alliance with humanity. "We were wrong about them," he had said. "We were wrong about so much. Do better than I did." The new High Chancellor was a younger named, the same ambassador who had advocated for humanity from the beginning. Her first official act was to propose a formal treaty of friendship between the Galactic Council and the Terran Coalition. The negotiations took months, but the final document was remarkable. It acknowledged the Council's past wrongs against humanity. It established equality between all signatory species. It created mechanisms for peaceful dispute resolution and mutual defense. It was not perfect, but it was a beginning. Director signed for the Coalition. Chancellor signed for the Council. The ceremony was held in Geneva, in the same plaza where Helena Marsh had once declared humanity's independence. Marsh herself attended, old now but still sharp. She watched the signing with tears in her eyes. "We did it," she said to Sarah, who stood beside her. "We actually did it, not just survived. We changed everything." "Not everything," replied, "but enough. Enough to give the next generation a chance at something better." "Your granddaughter, I am so sorry." Nodded slowly. The grief was still fresh, still painful. It would never fully heal, but she had made her peace with it. She knew what she was doing, said. She chose to give her life so others could live. That is the most human thing anyone can do. The ceremony concluded with speeches and celebrations. Representatives from every species in the new alliance mingled freely, sharing food and drink and stories. Old enemies laughed together. Former oppressors and formerly oppressed found common ground. It was not perfect. Prejudices did not disappear overnight. Old wounds took time to heal. But for the first time in galactic history, there was genuine hope that things could be different, that the cycles of war and domination might finally end. 3 cycles after the battle, the first joint exploration mission departed from Earth orbit. It was crewed by humans and aliens alike, sent to investigate the dark spaces where the swarm had originated, not to conquer or exploit, but to understand, to ensure that no new threat could emerge undetected. The mission commander was a young human named David Marsh, Helena's great-grandson. His crew included engineers, biologists, and a tactical officer whose grandfather had once ordered attacks on human colonies. "This is the exploration vessel New Dawn," David transmitted as his ship prepared to jump. "We go not as conquerors but as seekers, not as enemies but as friends. The galaxy is vast and full of wonders. It is time we discovered them together." The ship vanished into hyperspace, carrying the hopes of a united galaxy. On Earth, life continued. Children were born who would never know the fear of the swarm. Cities grew and prospered. Art and science flourished. The scars of war slowly faded, replaced by new growth. Humanity had come far since those first terrifying days when the Galactic Council announced there was nothing it could do to save them. They had fought and bled and sacrificed. They had been betrayed and abandoned and left for dead. And they had risen despite it all. Not because they were stronger or smarter or more ruthless than other species, but because they refused to give up, because they clung to hope when hope seemed foolish, because they reached for tomorrow even when today seemed impossible. The Council had lied, the sky had fallen, and humanity had caught it. Now they held it up for everyone to see, a sky full of stars waiting to be explored, a future full of possibilities waiting to be claimed, a galaxy that had nearly destroyed them, now united under their example. Sarah spent her final years at the academy, teaching young officers from a dozen species. She told them stories of the old wars, not to glorify violence, but to remind them why peace mattered. She showed them that courage was not the absence of fear, but the determination to act despite it. When she died, peacefully in her sleep at the age of 97, representatives from every known species attended her memorial. They spoke of her bravery, her wisdom, her unwavering dedication to protecting the innocent. They called her the Mother of the Alliance, the Admiral who saved the galaxy. But the inscription on her tomb, chosen by her family, was simpler. She fought so others could live. She lived so others could dream. Helena Marsh passed away 3 years later. Her memoirs had become required reading at every academy and university in the Alliance. Her strategies were studied by military commanders across the galaxy. Her vision had shaped the very foundations of interstellar cooperation. Her final message, recorded days before her death, was broadcast to every world in the Alliance. "I have lived longer than I ever expected," she said. "I have seen things I never dreamed possible. When I was young, humanity was alone. We thought the stars were empty. We feared what might be out there in the darkness. Now I look at the galaxy and see friends everywhere. Species that were once our enemies now stand beside us. Worlds that were once beyond our reach are home to human children. The darkness that once terrified us has become a frontier to explore. I do not know what the future holds. No one does. There will be challenges. There will be setbacks. There will be moments when it seems like everything we built might fall apart. But I believe in humanity, not because we are perfect, not because we always make the right choices, but because we never stop trying, we never stop reaching, we never stop hopping. The Galactic Council lied to us. They said we could not survive. They said we were alone. They said the sky was falling and there was nothing to be done. We proved them wrong, and we will keep proving them wrong forever." Her words echoed across light years, received on planets she had never visited, heard by beings she had never met. They would be remembered for generations, a testament to human resilience and the power of refusing to surrender. The sky had fallen, humanity had caught it, and now they carried it forward into a future brighter than anyone had imagined. The galaxy would never be the same, it would be better. Because humanity had shown everyone what was possible when you refused to give up. When you refused to be prey. When you looked at impossible odds and said, "Not today." The stars waited, the future beckoned, and humanity, together with their allies, walked forward to meet it. Not as victims, not as survivors, but as the builders of a new age. An age that would last forever.